Welcome back to Late Start Show with me, Charlie Martin.
And me, Jack Nelson.
We once again hope you're enjoying your nice break from waking up at the crack of dawn. Hopefully we can give you something good to listen to in your morning commute to school. This week's interview is with history teacher and former U.S. student of the class of 2000, Mr. Lewis. It was fascinating to see somebody who has been a part of the U.S. community for so long talk about his experience with the school. And it was one of our most interesting ones. Before we get to that great interview, let's first review what this week has to offer.
In our sports section, soccer picked up a win on Saturday against NDCL 4-1 in the OHSAA sectional finals. This was their first postseason game and showed off the team's strength as they look to make a deep run through the playoffs. The team advances to take on 22 seed Norton High School on Wednesday at 4:30 p.m. in the district semifinal at home. If they win, they look to play the winner of 13 seed Canfield and 9 seed Medina Highland next Saturday at 10 a.m. Good luck to them.
Next, in football, we had a big win against Don Community Prep from Cincinnati, 34-0, to go to an overall record of 4-5. The team enters the final week of the regular season looking to beat the Howland Tigers at their house on Friday at 7 p.m. A win would propel the team to a neutral overall record and hopefully into a playoff berth. We look to win, and then for the first time in a long time, have 3 consecutive football postseasons. Hopefully we will play well and stay strong in the playoffs.
In cross country, where after an off week, the team finished in 5th place at the OHSAA district meet at Madison on Saturday. With this placing, the team qualified for the regional meet on Saturday at Boardman. Senior captain Jack O'Neill once again led the way with an 11th place finish and an impressive time of 16 minutes and 20 seconds. The team looks to go against powerful teams like St. Ignatius, Mentor, and Chardon. Hopefully they can place well and advance to the next round.
Let's now get into some of the biggest news around the school. This past week, Mr. Dan Multhrop, CEO of the City Club of Cleveland, spoke at our assembly to share the history of the City Club and to discuss the importance of civil discourse and emphasize the necessity of exercising our right to vote. Again, tickets for Agatha Christie's Spiderweb, the fall play, are on sale, and it will be performed in the auditorium on October 25th and 26th at 7 p.m. And tickets are available online or can be purchased at the door.
Just a reminder that play is Mr. Sanborn's first play at University School, so let's make sure to support him. And now looking at our week's senior speeches, we had excellent speeches from Z. McGee and Tyler Zyro, and look forward later this week to a speech from Casey Martin, and then next week on Tuesday from V.O. Pavlidis.
Well guys, that's enough from us about this week. Coming up soon is an interview with history teacher and alumnus Mr. Lewis. He sat down with us to talk about his experience as a student, his journey coming back later to teach, and his opinions on many different things at US. Alright, let's jump into it. Mr. Lewis, up next. Welcome back to the show. We are here with Mr. Lewis, a history teacher and former U.S. graduate of the class of 2000, and the head coach of the speech and debate team at University School. He's taught at University School since 2010 and has previously taught at St. Paul Academy and Summit School from 2006 to 2010. How are you, Mr. Lewis?
I'm doing well.
You're the first teacher that we've interviewed so far who is a U.S. graduate who's returned to the school to teach. What are some of your favorite memories from your days as a student?
My favorite memories from my days that's a great question. Mostly, I think, are debate related. Debate was the most important thing that I did here at US. So back when I was a student here, Shaker Heights had a really good team, and they used to hold a huge tournament. Everyone from around the state came to that tournament. And I remember winning that tournament in Lincoln Douglas debate. That was probably my best memory here. But I think a big part of debate for me was the friendships I formed. So when I think about my wedding, for example, a lot of the people at my wedding were debate people. So I think about a lot of friends that I made along the way, my co-captain, Will Henry, and just other people that, going to states together, ordering way too much food from Applebee's, going to Nats together, and just spending that week in Portland. My first time on an airplane was a debate trip. We flew to Philly for the UPenn trip. So debate definitely has the best memories for me as a student.
That's really, really cool.
So after graduating from US in 2000, you decided to return years later and teach. Can you tell us about that journey back to US?
Yeah. So when I went to college, I majored in history because that was my passion intellectually. I pretty much thought I was done with debate after high school. I ended up debating in college. It was a way for me to get into something that I was familiar with and to find a circle of friends. But I didn't intend to go back into the classroom. I think the thing that was really most responsible for me becoming a teacher was the REACH program. So I worked as a college counselor in the REACH program. And I remember I worked with these amazing mentor teachers. A lot of them were from Cleveland Public Schools. And I remember them telling me again and again, you're going to be a teacher one day. And I didn't want to be a teacher. I was going to go to law school. I was going to become a lawyer. Maybe I'd get a PhD and I'd research. And I would sort of teach at a college setting. But I had no intention of teaching high school. But I went to graduate school instead of law school. And in graduate school, I found what really interested me was stories and talking about stories. And I love reading books. And I had these classmates who were really interested in researching and writing their own books. And I wasn't as interested in that. I was interested in just reading and talking to people about books. And so I made the decision not to pursue a PhD after I got my master's degree. I looked for jobs, and I did look for some jobs, in business and stuff. And surprise, surprise, not many businesses want to hire someone with a MA in history. So I taught, SPA took a chance on me, fresh out of grad school. I went there to teach, and then 4 years later, US, the job here opened up, and I knew I had to come back. And Mr. Gallagher called me and brought me out for a visit. They hired me, and the rest is history.
I know I've personally heard from many different people that, and you've told me personally about your stories about debating at US. What was it like becoming the head debate coach after you had come back to US?
So, for years, the debate coach at US was Mr. Peter Paik. And when I was at US, the team was a very small team. And then when I had returned, he had built it up into this juggernaut. And I was his assistant for 8 or 9 years. And then he decided that it was time for me to become head coach. And I felt this immense responsibility because of the legacy he had created and my desire to live up to that legacy, to achieve that same level of greatness, but also to do so in a way that was as ethical as humanly possible, and also in a way in which I could find ways for our team to give back. And so something I am constantly doing is I'm constantly thinking about how can I live up to the legacy of Mr. Paik, but not also Mr. Paik, but my own coach, Doc Strader, who's also my Latin and Greek teacher. I don't know, Mr. Fletcher also had Doc Strader. I know Doc Strader was a huge influence in Mr. Fletcher's life as well. And so every day when I'm thinking about speech and debate, and I think about speech and debate every day, I don't think a day goes by without me thinking about it. The pressure I feel is how do I live up to the legacy of these great teachers and coaches who are also wonderful people?
That's really cool because, everybody looks up to their coach. I still remember in middle school, myself, Mr. Lewis, the head high school debate coach, because Mr. Paik had just left at that point, and just thinking to myself, wow, high school debate's definitely going to be something.
So, Mr. Lewis, this is going back a little bit, why did you make the decision to come to US as a student, and when did you know that US was the place for you?
Yeah, so it's really interesting because I grew up on the border of East Cleveland, Cleveland Heights. And, my family friends, they were mostly working class, newly emergent into the middle class. Really stable families, but families that did not have access to a lot of formal education. And so US was, my parents, my dad has an associate's degree. My mom did not finish college. So higher education wasn't something that my family thought a lot about. My family, we really weren't exposed to the world of independent schools. We knew a kid in our religious community who had gone to Hawken, and that was kind of a distant, well, maybe if you're as smart as Michael Hawkins was, his last name was Hawkins actually, you might go to a school like Hawken, but that wasn't something that was on my radar. But East Cleveland has a wonderful gifted and talented program. At the time it was called Focus Scope. The principal of the school is actually Mr. Litford's father. And it was a wonderful program. And I think when I was accepted into that program, my parents really saw that I had great academic potential. And they wondered, well, is there something we should be doing with this academic potential? And I still don't know how we discover university school. I don't know. Okay, I know there was like some talks on, well, hey, you'll apply to Hawking. You probably won't go to Hawking. It's way too expensive for us, but maybe we'll apply. I do remember US used to have this great space simulator at the lower school. And I remember going to space camp. I don't know how I got there. I think someone might have given me a gift certificate or something, and I got to the space camp. And it was my first time at university school. It was my parents' first time ever seeing university school. I mean, it's people who grew up in Cleveland Heights, East Cleveland, coming up into, Shaker Heights. That wasn't something, we didn't spend a lot of time, let alone Hunting Valley for that matter, in this part of the world. And that was a huge eye opener for us. And so we applied here, we applied to Hawken, and both schools offered me the same amount of financial aid. So my parents were like, well, you decide, because the price tag's the same for us. And I don't know, there was just something about US when I visited here, and I cannot put my finger on it, that like I felt like this was the school for me. This is where I would fit in. And this kind of fit, even though I was 10 years old, my vision of what a school community would be like. So I made the decision to go to US. I think there was some hemming and hawing, but I always knew I was going to come to US. And it's something to this day, I'm so appreciative to my parents for, because even with the financial aid, it was a huge stretch for them. I was the oldest of 4 kids. My brothers and sisters still joke about the things we didn't have when we were kids because my parents were paying their portion of US tuition. It's, I think, one of the greatest sacrifices and gifts they've given me as a US education.
And you obviously value university school, and in Mr. Gallagher's back to school address at the beginning of this year, he told a great story. And from what I remember, the story goes, in your first year back, you asked the then director of the upper school, Dr. O'Neill, about the faculty dress code. And Dr. O'Neill said that the faculty dress in a way that shows the importance of their work. You then smiled widely and responded, well, then I should come in a tuxedo. Why do you value even the small things about this school so much?
I think because I'm conscious of the fact that I had access to something that so many of my friends didn't. So many of the kids I went to elementary school with didn't. I wasn't the smartest kid in my elementary school classes by far. There were far smarter kids than I was. I was a kid whose parents was aware of these opportunities and was able to access these opportunities and put me in the right place. And throughout my life, again and again and again, I have been given access to things that I did not earn, that were given to me. And I wasn't always keenly aware of that. Sometimes I thought I deserved and I earned it. But as I get older, I think I'm more aware of the fact that like I live a very, very wonderful life that many people have worked hard for. And it's my responsibility to realize how fortunate I am and to do the most with what I'm given. If I can hopefully sort of do something to make someone else's life a little better, that would be great. But even if I don't have that impact on people, I mean, the very least I can do is make the most of the many, many advantages I've been given.
Wow. One of the things I know we kind of touched here and there was about the idea of community, and like bringing community from your past schools and completely changing communities when you came to US. One of the things that I've always loved about our community is our affinity groups like Pembroke and that support like Black and African American students at US. As the current head of Pembroke Society, what is the importance of that group in this school's community? Yeah,
and I'm one of 3 heads. I work with Mr. Steve and I work with Ms. Barham in our human resources office as well. So it's really interesting because when I was a student here, I don't think we had as well defined as a mission as Pembroke does today. I think there are a couple of things that are amazing about Pembroke. The first thing that's amazing about Pembroke is that it allows our Black students at US to share a piece of themselves with the broader community. And that's what a great community looks like, when people can come to the table and say, hey, we have this common goal, we have this common mission, we're brothers. But there's a part of me that's, distinct and special and interesting. I want to share it with you all. I think we can do that. I think Pembroke has done that through things even like our Black History Month announcements, where students talk about figures in Black history that appeal to them. I think the second thing that Pembroke does and may do a better job of now than when I was a student here is helping students in Pembroke to sort of embrace their common racial heritage and to celebrate the Blackness that unites them while recognizing that there are many different ways of being Black and that there is no one Black story, or there's no such thing as sort of someone who is more Black than another person. I think we even do that by sort of bringing in different alumni who have gone into many different fields and who have sort of gone into many different walks of life. And it allows our students just to see, and the students in our entire community, the beautiful range of diversity included in Blackness in the university school experience and in the American experience. I think something that sometimes I don't appreciate is that every year university school produces at least 10 kids who are going to go into the world and are going to be Black men who are professionals that build up their communities. When you think about the statistics, that's an amazing phenomenon that every year we're producing 10 Black men who are going to go on to be doctors, lawyers, teachers, financiers, whatever. And they're going to build up this world. And I think Pembroke is the beginning of that. And my hope is that 30 years from now, whatever you are, whether you're, president of a bank, whether you're president of a university, whether, you're on the Supreme Court, and you come back and you're like, okay, I remember those other guys in Pembroke and the things that they did and our common U.S. experience. One of my favorite events every year is seeing the African-American alumni reunion and seeing those guys come together and then seeing younger people look up to them and like, wow, that's where I'm headed in 30 to 40 years.
Wow. I mean, I know always looking up and like when I even went to the brunch myself, talking to people, connecting with people and seeing other people's experience after US and how much they've succeeded just because US has propelled them into that next stage of life. Going back to like helping out as my advisor, you've constantly helped me with everything. I'm really, really grateful for the opportunities that you've given me throughout only 1 year so far. Did you have an advisor or mentor who really helped you and shaped your high school experience?
Yeah, I had a couple. One was Mr. Dave Stewart. He was the head of the Reach program at the time. He was great. And one of the things I loved about Dave Stewart, and before Dave Stewart was Miss Betty English, she was also director of the Reach program, is that they were the kind of people who were just blunt. Like when I didn't measure up, they would tell me, you don't measure up, you need to do better. And they were always willing to call me out. My sponsor was Dr. Phil Kokotilo. I just love Dr. Kokotilo. He taught me as a junior in his English class. I think he got me. He got my quirks. He got my eccentricities. He was really patient. He wrote a college recommendation for me. He was just a great mentor. I think Mr. Stewart and Miss English sometimes, they were the ones who sort of held me to the standard. And Dr. Kokotilo held me to a standard, but he was patient and sympathetic towards me when I fell short.
Is there anything that people may not understand about you that you want them to understand?
That's a great question. Being a teacher means constant interaction with people. I think I am a person who is most comfortable with ideas. I'm a person most comfortable with books. Emotions come hard for me. And even though I might seem extroverted, I think I am really by nature an introvert. When I go home and I can kind of breathe a deep sigh of relief and just be by myself, those are the moments where I really recharge my batteries. I think if there are times where I might come off as being a little bit cold, if there are times where I might come off as being brusque, I don't think that's a lack of caring. That's interacting with people, I think does on a certain level come hard for me. I think of someone like my wife, who is like the biggest people person I know. Like she is just a kind, giving person. Like, and she just loves people. Like she genuinely loves, like I hear her maybe say one bad thing about a person a year. And I'm always amazed at how easily she interacts with other people and how kind she is. And because it does genuinely come difficult for me. So there are moments where, it's just like, why is he so short? Why is he so brusque? Why is he so, I think that's it. That I'm just people come hard for me. Ideas come easy for me.
Yeah.
Arguments come easy for me. Sometimes, I think of what the historian Joseph Ellis wrote about John Adams. He said that his favorite form of conversation was an argument. When I read that sentence, I identify with that.
Yeah.
Because sometimes my favorite form of conversation is an argument. The emotional stuff comes hard for me.
Yeah, and I think we all have that one thing that maybe people don't know about us that we would like them to know. So you've talked about, through Pembroke, understanding other people's perspectives. You've talked about your wife understanding her perspective. What do you think is the importance of learning from other people's perspectives and really being open to that?
Yeah, I think it's hugely important. I don't want to go on a soapbox, but I think we are at a time where it is critically important to learn how to just understand people with whom you might disagree. The formative experience of my life was in college. My college roommate, who I still talk to this day, was someone whom I disagreed with on almost everything we disagreed with. We disagreed on religion. We disagreed on sports. We disagreed on everything. He's a Bengals fan. I'm a, Browns fan, kind of. He went to Columbus Academy. I went to US, so just very, different people. But living with someone like that, and I deeply respect him. He's one of the most intelligent people I've ever met in my life. He's one of the most ethical, one of the most upright. And so learning to sort of, respect someone whom you think is wrong on so many things, but you can still appreciate his intelligence and you can still appreciate his ethics, was such an important life lesson for me. And I think, and to this day, there are things that I disagree with him on that I will ask him to explain to me. Like, well, why do you believe X?
Yeah, that's important.
And I ask that question not because my next thing is, well, here's why you're wrong, because that's where I'll cut off the conversation sometimes. Because I just want to understand. I just want to make sure that I understand why he believes what he believes, so I can sort of make sure that I'm getting the best form of the argument. So sometimes it's good for me to check myself with someone who disagrees with me, just to make sure that I've given their argument all the consideration that I should. Okay, so you might believe this. Let me make sure I really, truly understand you. So if I say that I don't believe that, I understand that I'm actually rejecting the best possible form of that argument. And I think that's a really important now when people have such strong views on so many issues.
We always ask this question to almost every single person, but I think it's really interesting, almost piggybacking off of that, really strong opinion idea. If you had the chance to change anything about US, what would you change?
I feel like this question is going to get me in trouble. If I could change anything about US, what would I change? That's a great question. I think the one thing that I would change, and this is based on my own memory as a student, is if there was a way, because as a kid who came from a family with really smart parents, my parents are some of the smartest people I've met, but they never went through this process of an independent school, applying for 4-year colleges, some of which were really selective and which I got rejected from. They never went through a process like that. Or coming from a family that was newly emergent into the middle class versus families that had had a measure of wealth in their family for decades. There were just certain structural differences in my life. Things that made it a little bit harder. So taking the RTA up to the Shaker campus and taking the shuttle to Hunting Valley versus driving to school. If we as a school could figure out a way, and I know, by the way, this is an issue that Mr. Gallagher is very passionate about, because I think we had a very similar, he at St. Ed's had a similar background that I did there. If there was a way we could even the playing field, so if one kid can afford a tutor, how do we make sure that every kid gets a tutor? If one kid can take SAT prep classes, how do we make sure that every kid can take SAT prep classes? If one kid can get a personal tennis coach, how do we make sure every kid can get a personal tennis coach? If one kid can go to debate camp, how do we make sure every kid can go to debate camp? How do we even the playing field? Because I think here at US, we do a good job of treating people equally. The problem is when people leave US. So how do we even that playing field? If that would be the thing I change, so that like the next kid who comes from my neighborhood might not have those initial hoops or things to figure out when they're coming into a world that's very much unlike the world that they and their parents are used to.
All right, well, this is our last question to finish it up. Mr. Lewis, how do you want to be remembered at US? Because you've been here already for more than a decade. Hopefully you'll mentor and give back to the community for only more decades to come. But how do you see your legacy being remembered at US?
Yeah, so a professor of mine in college, he was actually my professor, he was our college advisor for the newspaper. He wrote a book about Kenyon. It's called Alma Mater. I recommend that everyone read it. It's a beautiful book. He talks about these professors who are kind of local heroes, who kind of build these really big reputations in the community and kind of become staples and pillars of the community. I think about people like the chemistry teacher when I was here, Mr. Johnston, Mr. Aliazzi in history. And barring some unforeseen circumstances, I plan to be here for the long term. And I think 30 years down the road, hopefully, when I retire, that's what I want people to think of me. I want them to think of me as one of those pillars of the school. I know US is going to go on after I go. US is far older than I am. But I do want, when I retire, for people to see me as someone who was a part of the foundation of this school and who the school very much will miss when I have to move on to whatever I do next.
And I think you're well on your way to that.
I would say, I know we all will miss you as a community if years down the line when you do leave. Well, Mr. Lewis, it's been really, really cool having you on the podcast today. Thank you so much for taking the time to share all your stuff. To our listeners, thank you so much for tuning in, and we hope you will join us next Wednesday for another episode of Late Start Show.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.